Yo, what's up guys? This time I'm going to show you guys how to make a crates plugin from scratch. Let's start by creating a new crate. We're going to do /crates, click create crate, and it will now prompt you for a crate name. You can also type cancel to cancel, so we're going to type test crate created. So now we can click here to manage the locations. We can add a new location. We'll make this a crate location. Look at that, now this is a crate. Here's the crates menu, so we can edit the locations, the rewards, and also get a key for the crate. Let's get some keys, and let's edit the rewards now. We'll add these in there. So now whenever you open the crate, you'll have an equal chance of getting any of these items here. You can also configure the weights in the config file. I'll show you how to do that as well. Click save. Now we can open the crate by right-clicking it. Nice. Nice. And we'll do one more. Sweet. So if you want to learn how to make that from scratch, keep watching. Alright, let's get started. The first thing that I want to do is create a way of obtaining a crate, because then we can actually have one to work with. So we'll do commands. We'll start by making a crate command, and also making a crate manager. And then also we're going to make a new package called models. We're going to make a new model called crates. So what are some of the things that we're going to store for a crate? We're going to store a name. So we'll do private final string name is final just because we're not going to be changing it after we assign it on the object. And then also, the way it's going to work is basically you're going to be able to create a crate, right? And then you're going to be able to create locations for that crate. That way you can have one crate defined in the config, and then that crate can be placed in many different locations, many different blocks. And all of those blocks where that crate exists will share the same characteristics. So they'll have the same crate name, the same rewards, stuff like that, okay? So let's do private final, we'll do a set of locations. So we want them, it's a set just because it's unique, although you could use a list if you want to. Very similar. So set of locations. So this will be the locations that this crate exists at. Okay. And then after that, we'll add a rewards field when we get to that point. But for now, we'll just do these two. So we're going to make a constructor. Here's some getters to get the name and get the locations. We'll also add a method for adding a location. So public void add location. Take in a location, and then we'll do this, or how about just locations.add location. Let's also have a remove location, so public void remove location, and make sure you do locations plural, referring to the hash set above, not location. Okay, cool. So now we have a basic idea of what a crate will look like in terms of like the actual entity, but now we need to figure out how we're actually going to store this. So of course, just like always, there's multiple ways you could do this. The way that I prefer to do this for a plugin like this will be to store it in a YML file. So all of our crates will be in a crates.yml file. It's going to look something like this. So you're going to have a crates section here, and then every subsection will be a individual crate, okay? So we have a Jesus crate, a Bob crate, and then per crate you have locations and also rewards. So for this one, we have a Bob crate, right? And then this Bob crate exists at these two locations. So this one here and this one here. So it stores the world and the XYZ coordinates for each crate. So that way, when you try opening a crate, it'll first check to see if that location exists for a crate and, just do all the matching and all that stuff, right? So this basically allows us to determine which blocks are crates or not crates, okay? And also, if a block is a crate, we'll know which crate it refers to, the Bob crate, and we'll also know which rewards to give when we get to that point, okay? So in this crate manager, we will focus on actually how to load that file and save that file, okay? First things first, let's get an instance of our main plugin class here. So private final crates plugin. We're going to initialize that in the constructor like this. And then now we also want to get a reference to the file that we're going to be accessing. So we're not going to use the config.yml, we're going to be using the crates.yml. So private final file crates file like that. And then now when we, instantiate this class here, we're going to do this.crates file is equal to new file. And then basically we want to get the file path for the file that we're trying to access. Luckily, Bucket has an easy way to do that. You can do plugin.get data folder. So this will return the actual folder path for the plugin. Let me just show you. So if we go to our Minecraft server here and we go to plugins, if we have a crates plugin, the folder will be called crates, right? So get data folder will return literally this path here. So whatever place you have your Minecraft server running, and then the plugin subfolder, and then the actual subfolder for the plugin itself, okay? So that will return that path. So we're going to do get data folder, and then we can add onto that crates.yml. So now this will give us a actual file reference to this file without regard to whether it exists or not, but we'll have access to it now. So now we can make a new method. So we'll call it private void load crates. So this is something that can run when the plugin starts up that will just access the file and load all the crates from the file, right? So first of all, we want to make sure that the file actually exists. If it doesn't, we'll just go ahead and create it on the fly. So we'll do if creates file, we'll say exists. So if it does not exist, we're going to try creating it by doing try creates file, creates new file, and then we're going to catch the exception. It's an IO exception, and we'll just print out a message, failed to create creates.yml. So now at this point, the file definitely should exist. So now we want to use the bucket YML API to actually access the data within it. So what I'll do is do private final file configuration. As you can see, it's from bucket.configuration.file. We'll say creates config. And so now we could go down here and do this dot creates config dot or is equal to YAML configuration dot load configuration, and then specify the file that you're trying to load. So basically all this will do is attempt to load this file that we specified, the creates.yml file, as a YML file that we can actually access using bucket. So hopefully it's valid YML within that file. Right now it's just complaining because we're trying to assign a value to the final variable. So let's just get rid of that. So now at this point, what we can do is actually parse the file to try obtaining the crates from it. So to do this, we're going to need to store crates. So we'll make yet another field up here called private final hash map. We're going to store each crate just by its name. So string and then crate, the entity that we created before, and we'll call it crates like that. So private final hash map crates, and then down here we could just initialize that. So crates is equal to new hash map like that. So now down here we can actually add the crates to that hash map. So this dot crates dot clear, make sure it's empty. So say var crates section. Everything in YML is basically a section. So that's how we'll access it. We'll do creates config dot get configuration section. So get configuration section, you give it a path. So the path will correspond to this right here. So the top level section is just crates, and then followed by a colon. This is just a section. So we're trying to access that top level section. And then after that, we're going to try accessing the individual names of the crates. Okay. So this will give us that configuration section. First, let's just make sure that exists before we continue. So if it does, we'll just return. Otherwise, we can now do, let's just loop through all of the names. So each individual name for each subsection, for each crate, right, within that crate section. So to do that, we can do, let's just say for string crate name, and then we could do crates section dot get keys, and then set deep to false. So that will only get the top level of keys. So that will do, as I just described, get the subsections of this current section. So Jesus, Bob, Sagar, Peanut, and so on, okay? So that will let you loop through that. And then for each crate name, now we want to actually create a crate. So crate is equal to new crate, and then now crate name like that. And now at this point, we can then load locations and then load rewards. We haven't really thought about rewards. We'll focus on that later, but we can load locations in pretty much the exact same way. So we can do configure, we'll do var locations section is equal to creates section dot get configuration section. How are we going to do the path? So if we look at our file here, it'll be creates dot the crate name and then dot locations. So that's what I'm going to do. So creates dot, or we'll put dot like that, plus creates name plus dot locations. Well, actually, just a correction, we don't need to specify creates dot because this is already the create section that it's pointing to. So we'll just add on to that basically. So it's just going to be create name plus dot locations. So this should give us a location section if it does exist. So we'll say if location section is not equal to null, then we will try loading those individual locations. So do yet another for loop for each location. String, we'll say key, and then we'll do locations section dot get keys. So this key here will correspond to just this number. So just like we used the crate name to access the individual crate, we'll use the location key here to access the individual location data. All right. So this here will do that. So we're going to use the key. So we're going to access the value by doing location section dot get string, and then the key, and then plus dot world. So that will get the world value as a string, which we will then use to actually get a bucket world from. If the bucket world does exist, then we'll grab the XYZ coordinates. And then finally, we'll make a new location out of that. So new location world XYZ, which we will then store inside the crate by doing crate.add location, which we created before. Okay. Just as a recap, all we're doing is accessing our crates.yml file. If it doesn't exist, we'll create it. And then we'll try loading it using the bucket YML API pretty much. Then what we're going to do is access the crates section within the YML file. If it exists, we're going to loop through all the subcrates, just the names, and then use the name to actually create a crate. And then for every single crate, we're going to try loading all the locations, add each of those locations to the crate, and then finally at the very bottom here, we then want to do crates dot put crate name and then crates like that. So we're adding all the crates that we loaded from the file to our actual crates hash map, which we can then use throughout the plugin when we're trying to work with crates. Okay, so now we need to do the opposite end of this coin, which is to actually save the crates. So public void save crates. Also, we want to make sure we call load crates, of course. So this .load crates. We'll just do it when the class gets created, which should just be when the plugin starts up. So it should load the crates, make sure the file exists and everything like that. So first we're just going to do crates.config and then set crates to null. We're just going to reset all the data essentially because we're going to be overriding it with what we have in memory. Then we're going to create it by doing var crates section is equal to crates config dot create section crates. So instead of getting it, now we're creating it from scratch. Creating it? Is that a pun? Anyway, so after we have that, we can now do for var crates dot value. So we're just looping through all the crates we have stored in memory in our hash map. And so for each of the crates, we're going to add a new section within that, crate section. So do var crate section is equal to crates section dot create section crate dot get name. I'll just paste this part. So to save locations, we're going to create our locations subsection, and then for each location that we have, we're going to create a new subsection using this key that we're just incrementing, this I variable that we're incrementing, and we'll just store the world as a string, the XYZ. Pretty simple, right? So that will store all of that, and then now finally at the very bottom here, once we've stored all of our crate information, we can then do try crates config dot save, and now we just need to tell it what file we're trying to save it to, so we're going to store it in the crates file. So hopefully that all makes sense so far. So now we have a way of loading crates from storage and also saving crates after we update them. So now let's go ahead and focus on actually creating new crates and all that fun stuff. So we'll make a new method. Well, actually, let's just add it to the top here. We'll do public void crate. So this will take in a crate name, so string name. We'll do crates dot put name, and then we're going to make a new crate out of that, and then we'll save. We want to make sure that we call save crates right away, just because if the plugin crashes or the server crashes, it may not have the latest data stored in the file. So we want to make sure that we just update it as soon as we can, because then the file will always have the latest data. Okay, I'll just add a similar method called create exists. So this will take in a crate name and just returns true or false if it exists or not. So with all that in mind, now let's work on our create command. So first of all, just check to see if it's a player. If it's not a player, tell them only players can use this command. Next, we'll just make sure the player has permission to run the command. I'm not typing this out in front of you just because you've probably seen this a million times. But then after this, we're going to do the part of checking to make sure they run the command correctly. So we want them to run /create name. Later on, we'll allow them to run like just /creates by itself, and that will open up a GUI. But for now, let's just do this, okay? So we're going to do if args.length is not equal to 2, or we'll say args, we'll get the first argument equals crate, and we're going to negate that, make it create, not crate. Okay, so what this will do is basically check to see, make sure that they have the required number of arguments, and then this part here will check to see and make sure that this argument actually says create or not, okay? So if they did not do it correctly, we're going to tell them how to run it, and then we're going to return true, just return out of it. Now at this point, we can then finally grab the crate name. So crate name is equal to args1. So that will grab it from the command. Now let's use our crate manager. We need to get a reference to that in this class. So private final crate manager. And then now down here, we can do crate manager, crate exists, crate name. So let's see if the name already exists as a crate. If it does, then we're going to do player.sendMessage already exists. So now at this point, finally everything is good to go. We have a crate name that's not already taken, so we can go ahead and create a crate. Okay, so do crate manager.create crate. That sounds crazy. Crate name. And that's it for now. Okay, so with all that in mind, we now have a way of actually creating a crate. And then after that, we're just making sure to register the command and passing the crate manager to that command. So let's go ahead and jump on the server now and see if it works. All right, I'm on the server now. There are no exceptions thus far. So now we're going to try a new command. So /creates, it says crates create name. So we'll do /creates create Billy. It says successfully created create Billy. That's great. So no exceptions in the console. Let's verify that actually, set the file correctly. So we'll go to plugins and then crates and then crates.yml. And look at that. Now we have our Billy crate. So crates and then Billy and then locations. And then here we'll actually store the locations. And then in the future, our other data, like reward data, right? So this is great so far. So as far as we can tell, it's able to load and save crates successfully. And so now we'll need to think about how we're going to add locations for crates. So what I'm thinking is that you can do /crates, and then that will open up a GUI menu through an inventory, and then that will show you a list of crates that you can then select, and then that will open up a submenu where you can add or remove locations for that specific crate. But that's just how I envision it. And so what we're going to do is import my simp API. It's just an API that you may have seen in my past videos where it has a bunch of useful utilities like menu manager, command manager, item utils, all kinds of stuff like that, color translator, a bunch of utils that I like to use in my various plugins just to make it easier so I don't have to recode or copy and paste a bunch of code every single time. So yeah, we're going to be bringing in simp API. We're going to be using that to do our GUI system. And yeah, let's get started. So here's simp API on GitHub. To actually import it to your project, you can use Maven or Gradle. I like to use Maven. It's pretty simple. Just make sure you have this repository and this dependency. But one thing I'll note is that this version here is out of date at the time of recording. I'll try and update this before I post the video, but it should be 4.6.0. This also fixed a few bugs, so make sure that when you install this, use that version instead. So I'll just copy this, then I'll come back here, go to my pom.xml, and then we're going to put this in here like that, and we'll come back to this, copy this, go back and put it in dependencies. And like I said, we'll just change the version to 4.6.0 and then click the Maven reload button. All right, that's it. So now we can use menu manager, pretty simple. So all we got to do is do menu manager dot setup. Now I want to say instance of the server, so we can do get server and then instance of the plugin. So this, there we go. We'll start by making a menus package like that. And then we're going to make a new Java class creates menu. So this will be the very first admin menu that you open when you're trying to manage your crates. So extends menu, make sure it's actually from simp API, not java.awt. And then now you want to implement all the methods as well as a constructor. We'll call the menu create admin menu. Then we'll do 9 slots. And then we'll do cancel all clicks true so you can't move any items. Now down here, this is where you define the items that are going to be inside the menu, okay? So I'm just going to copy and paste these because you don't need to see me type all these out. We're going to have 2 items. We're going to have list crates, which will take you to a submenu where you can view all the crates on the server. We'll focus on this one later, but when you click this one, it will allow you to create a crate instead of having to run the command basically, okay? So let's focus on this list crates submenu so that we can list all the crates we have access to, and then we can also click into that and manage the locations for each crate as well. If the current item, which is the item that they clicked or used, if that's null, we're just going to return because we don't really care about that. And then now we can do something like if e.getCurrentItem.getType. If that type is equal to material.chest, that means that we know they clicked on the list crates button. So what we want to do is open up that submenu. Open list crates submenu. So we'll actually need that menu, so we're going to create a new Java class creates list menu. So this one, instead of a menu, is going to be a paginated menu, because if you don't know what this is, a paginated menu is basically a menu with pages. This is just a more advanced version of the menu class, so that you can like click next page or last page, you can click first page. So this way, if you have a menu where you need to display a bunch of items, this will allow you to put all the items into this menu and then go through the different pages, like on a website, for example. So first you need to use this data to items method here to basically get a list of item stacks, which will represent the items of the inventory of the menu that you're going to be paginating through, okay? So in other words, we're going to get a list of all the crates on the server and then get an item for each of those crates to represent them in the menu, okay? So we will first need an instance of our crate manager. One way we could do this, we'll do private final crate manager, like that. Pass it in. Now we need a method within the crate manager to actually get all of the crates because we don't have one yet. So we'll just do it above. So we do public list, and for this we'll do simply crates dot values, which returns a collection of crates. We then want to take that collection and return it as a list. So return new array list of that. So now back here in our new menu, we can do for bar crates and then crate manager dot get crates list. So now we're looping through all the crates on the server. And then for each of the crates on the server, we're going to have an item to represent it, which will just be a chest with the display name being the name of the crate. and then the lore will just say click to manage this crate. So when you click the crate, it'll open the individual crate like management menu, okay? So up here we're going to do items is equal to new array list, and then in the loop here we'll do items.add item, and then return items. So now what menu manager will do behind the scenes is when it creates a new paginated menu to display to the player, it will use this method here to get all the items that it needs to display and automatically paginate them for you. So it's going to be really cool to see. The next thing is a menu name. So we'll just say available crates. And the slots we're going to set to 54, which is the highest number, which is what you want to do for a paginated menu. And then we're going to cancel all clicks so you can't move any items. And then this method is the same. We're just going to handle like the clicking of the buttons in the menu. So if you click nothing, just return. And then after that, we can do if e.getCurrentItem.getType is equal to chest. Now we have a problem we need to solve. When you click a chest though, how does it know which chest you clicked on? Like which crate you clicked on? So one way you can overcome this, and hopefully you learned this from my previous videos, is you can edit the persistent data container of the item and just store the name of the crate that it's referring to. So we'll do item meta is equal to item.getItem meta, and then we'll do meta.get persistent data container. Sorry, my cat's meowing if you hear that. Dot set, and now here we want the namespace key, so just what key we're going to identify this field with. What I'll do is create this key in the crate manager, so do private namespace key create key. This dot create key is equal to new create namespace key, and so now it needs an instance of the plugin, which you already have, so we'll do this dot plugin, and then we can do the key name, so this would just be, we could do like create name like that. So now we'll just make a getter for that. So down here at the bottom we can do code generate getter, what is it, create key, there we go. So now back in our creates list menu, we can then do creates manager dot get create key like that. So now we have a key to refer to this by, and then we can set the data type as a string because it's a crate name, and then we're going to store the name by doing create dot get name. All right, so then finally after making that change, don't forget to do item dot set item meta like that. So now down here, when you actually click a chest, we can then check the PDC to get the crate name. And then we'll do string create name is equal to meta.get persistent data container. And then now we'll do the same key. So we'll do this dot create manager dot get create key. And then we'll do the same type, which is a string. So this should give us a string, which is the crate name that we stored in the item above, which we can then use if create name is not equal to null. Now we can open the create management menu. So we need to create yet another menu to do that. So we're going to do new create menu. So instead of creates menu, it's just create menu singular. And so this one will just be a normal menu with a few options within it. Now we want the name of the menu to have the crate name, and we also want to obtain the crate within this. So what we need to solve now is how can we actually get the crate name passed from the previous menu. So within Simp API, there's a way to do that using the player menu utility. So if we go back to our creates list menu, first we're going to get the player who clicked on the inventory, and then now we could use the player menu utility, which is just available in this class overall, dot set data, and then now you can provide an identifier. So we'll say crate name, and then now we can do the actual crate name. And then after that, we can now do menu manager dot open menu, and we can specify the menu that we're trying to open for the player. So we'll do create menu dot class, and then the player that we're trying to open it for, which is player. So this player menu utility is basically a way to transfer data from one menu, which is this one here, to the next menu, which is this one here. So now in here, as you can see in the constructor, we have the player menu utility. So all we got to do to access that value is just do player menu utility dot get data this time. So get data create name. So that's how that works. So we will start that above, private final string create name. And then here we're going to assign it. So this dot create name is equal to that. And right now it's just complaining because the return type of this is going to be an object, but this is obviously expecting a string. So one thing that you can do to have it returned as a string is specify the class that you want to return it as. So we can do string.class. So now finally in our menu name, we can then do, we'll say manage and then the crate name. So just say in purple manage and then crate name. Now I'm going to add these items here. So we're going to have 3 items in the submenu. It's going to be locations. So we're going to click to manage the crate locations, which will open up the location submenu. We're going to have a reward submenu and then a way to get a key. We'll focus on these two later. Now we're going to focus on the locations button here. So we're going to make yet another menu, and we'll call it the create locations menu. So this menu is going to be a paginated menu as well. Paginated menu. And the way that this one will work is basically it's going to be a paginated menu, so it's going to have a list of items, and each of those items will be the locations for the crate. But we're going to make it so that the first item is just going to be a button that when you click it, it'll allow you to create a new location for a crate. So I think it'll make more sense when I just show you. So let me just code it and it'll be more clear. So first of all, we'll need to define the items, of course, that are going to be in the paginated menu, just like we did before. So this would be, again, a list of all the locations of the crate, along with the new location button that we're going to add. We'll start by creating a new list, adding that first item to that list, and then now we can add all the locations. So we're going to need the crate that was passed over from the previous menu. So I'll just go back to the previous menu and I'll just copy how we did it. So we're going to copy this, and we're going to store that up here as a private final string crate name, and then boom. So now we're going to set the crate name, grab it from the PMU. We also need our crate manager so we can actually get the crate. So for this one, we'll just pass it into the constructor like that. So now finally down here, we could do crate is equal to crate manager dot get crates. Looks like we don't even have a method for that. So let's go back to our crate manager and create one. Anyway, so we're going to do public crate get crate by name. And then the key of the hash map, of course, is the name. So we can simply do return this dot crates dot get and then name. So we're just getting a crate by the key in this case, which is the name, so we can directly return it. If it doesn't exist, it'll of course be null. So now back in our menu here, we can do get crate by name and then pass in the crate name that we got above from the PMU. And so now we'll say if crate is not equal to null, then we can loop through all the locations. So var location and then crate.get locations. And then for every single location, we just want to add a new item stack to our menu. Here's what that will look like. So first we're going to find the lore of each item, which will just contain the world name and the XYZ coordinates. And then we'll say click to teleport or right click to remove. So you can teleport to a specific crate location so you know where it is, or also just remove it. And so then after that, we're going to put that into an item stack. It's just going to be a chest, and it's going to be green, say location, pretty simple. And then we'll add that to our list of items. Then finally at the very end, we can do return items. So now menu manager will automatically put all of the crate locations into that paginated menu for you to scroll through essentially, okay? So now we'll need the locations for, and we'll do crate name, title. And then for slots, we want the highest amount, which is 54 since it's a paginated menu. And then cancel all clicks true so you can't move anything. Now we'll handle when the menu is clicked, so we'll do var clicked item is equal to e.get current item. So we'll say if clicked item.get type is equal to material.chest, and we're going to be interested in that because all the locations that we put above are going to be actual chests. Otherwise, if it's a emerald, then they click to new location, so get type is equal to material.emerald. So that's the first item that we specified above for the new location button. So in a minute, we'll worry about how to implement this. We're going to have to come up with a system to basically prompt them to select a location and then handle that when we're done. For now, let's just handle these two. So click to teleport or right click to remove a location. So let's start with teleport because I think that's more easy. So first of all, we'll need to figure out which location is corresponding to which, because they're all going to be chests, right? So as we learned before, a way we can do that is by storing the information in the persistent data container. Meta is equal to item.getItem meta. Now we'll go back to our crate manager because we need a key. So we'll put this alongside our crate key, private name spaced key, location key. You can put it wherever you want. You can put that directly in the menu class, but I just want to put it here just because we already have access to the plugin instance here, so it's easier to just initialize it here. So now we'll do this dot location key is equal to new namespace key, this dot plugin, and then we'll say create location. And then we'll make a getter for that at the bottom. So code generate getter location key. So now finally back in the create locations menu, we can now go to the bottom here and do meta dot get persistent data container dot set create manager dot get location key. And then for the data type, we have to think about this one. So what we're trying to store here is a location, so we can just identify one location from another. One way you could handle this is by serializing a location to a string. So what I'll do is just make a simple utility class that can take a location and then use the world name, the XYZ coordinates, and then convert that to a string, and then convert it back as well. So let me just make a new utils package like this. We're going to make a new class inside of that called location utils. So here's the code for that. So we're going to first have a serialized location method. This is going to take in a location and then simply return a string that includes the world name and then the XYZ coordinates separated by commas. So that allows us to just represent our location as an actual string, which we can then have another method for, which will do the opposite. So if we know how to encode it, we can obviously decode it. So first we'll split it by commas, since we know it's going to be separated by commas, right? We'll make sure it has all the required information by making sure that's 4 parts, 1, 2, 3, 4. And then we're going to use that first world name to actually get a bucket world. If it doesn't exist, we'll return null. And then if it does exist, then we'll also parse and get the XYZ coordinates and make a new bucket location out of that. If it cannot do any of that, it can't parse it or anything like that, there's a number format exception, it's just going to return null. So if it can deserialize it, it will return locate the location. If it can't, it will return null. So now back in our creates location menu, we can now we'll store it as a string, but then we can do location utils dot serialize location. So now we're storing that location as a string in the item itself, and now we could do item.setItem meta like that. So now down here at the bottom, when we actually handle the click of the item, the chest item, we can get which location it is by. So first I'm going to check to see if the clicked item dot get item meta is equal to null. If it's equal to null, or how about we just do not equal to null? If it's not equal to null, then we'll go further, and now we're going to grab the serialized. I spelled that right. Clicked item dot get item meta dot get persistent data container dot get create manager get location key, and then the same data type, which is a string. So this will attempt to grab the information in that key. If it's stored, this will be null if it's not there. So we'll do if serialized location is not equal to null, meaning we actually grabbed a location. Now we can deserialize it by doing location utils dot deserialize location serialized location. And then now we could say if location is not equal to null. If that's the case, then obviously it's a valid location, we can work with it. So now we'll say if e.get, or we can actually do is right click. If it's a right click, then if we look at our code here, we said click to teleport, right click to remove. So we'll say if it's a right click, then we're going to remove it. So we'll say, for now, just say remove location. Otherwise, we're going to do else, and then player.teleport location, or it's just LOC location like that. Teleported to create location. Okay, so hopefully this all makes sense. I just want to say, obviously, don't, try and avoid having 5 nested if statements. I'm sure you could clean this up, but I think logically, though, it makes sense how I'm doing it. I like to kind of do it like this when I'm doing videos because it makes sense just to check all these things one by one. So I know somebody will comment on that, but so how do we remove a location? So since this will be the case of modifying our crate, let's just go ahead and add a new method to our crate manager to handle a situation like that. So we're going to make a new public void remove crate location. Then what I'll do is pass in the crate identifier, which is just our crate name, and then the location that we're trying to remove. So first of all, we need to get the crate. So var crate is equal to get crate by name, crate name, and then if crate is equal to null, then return. Otherwise, we're going to do crate dot remove location. And then since we made a change though, we want to make sure to do save crates. We don't have to update our hash map just because when we do get crate by name, this is going to grab it from the hash map. So we still have a reference variable to that location. So that's fine. We don't need to update our hash map. It's still there. But since we made a change by calling remove location, we need to actually update the file still. So we'll call save crates and that will update the file. So now back in our menu that we're working on, we can go back down here and we could say crate manager dot remove crate location, crate name, and then LOC for location. And then we could say player dot send message location removed. And then also a little trick you can do, this is added to the new version of Simp API, you can just call reload, and this will just reload the current content of the menu. So you'll see the item actually removed from the inventory, so the location is no longer there. So the next thing is going to be a little bit of harder part. It's actually not that hard at all. It's going to be adding a new location. So what I'll do for this is make a new class. I'm not really sure where to put it. I'll just put it actually in listeners. So let's make a new listeners package. Sorry if you hear my cat. So in the listeners package, we're going to make a new class called create location selector. So this will allow you to, basically just handle the process of selecting a new create location. So there's a reference to our plugin, but we're also going to need a way to store which players are currently selecting a new location. Because basically you'll click the emerald right to add a new location. That will close the menu and say right click a block to select a new location. And then we'll have to essentially track who we're waiting on to select the block. And we'll have to have a listener, that's why we're implementing listener here, to listen for whenever they right click a block. And then when that's triggered, we'll check to see if we're waiting for them. If we are waiting for them, we'll use that block as the new create location. Okay. So to do that, just like I always do, we'll use a hash map and we'll store it by the key is going to be the player's UUID who we're waiting on, and then the string here will be the crate that we're trying to store it for. So we'll call it player selecting. First, we'll need a method to initialize the selection process. So we'll do public void start selection. And we'll say player, and then string create name. So we'll do player selecting dot put, and then player dot get unique ID, and then create name. So it's really that simple. But then we'll also have our event handler. So event handler void on block select, and then player interact. So this will allow us to detect when a player right clicks a block or something like that. So we'll say if event dot get action is equal to, or how about not equal to action dot right click block, then return. We specifically want the player to right click a block to turn that block into a crate, right? After that, we want to check to see if we're waiting on that player or not by checking to see if they're in this. So we'll say if not player selecting dot contains key player or event dot get player, so the player actually right click the block dot get unique ID. So if the player is not in the hash map, then return because we're not waiting on them for anything. Okay, so now at this point we are waiting on the player, so we'll do event.set canceled to true in case they right clicked like a chest or something like that. Now we'll get the location, so location is equal to event.get, we'll say get clicked block dot get location. Then let's also get the crate name, so string crate name. We can actually remove the player as well, so we can do player selecting dot remove, and then remove him by the identifier, which is the UID, so event.get unique ID. After that, you can do this, which is remove the player from the hash map because we're no longer tracking them. They've selected a block, which we were waiting for them to do. But what's cool is that at the same time, when you call remove, it will also give you the value stored in that hash map entry. So in this case would be the crate name, which we need to update the crate with. We'll need a new method for that in our crate manager. So we'll go back here, and then right under or above this method, we'll add a new one. So add crate location, string crate name, location, like that. Now we'll just do the same thing. So boom, boom, and then create dot add location, and then save crates. So this time we're adding new location and then overwriting the file with the new changes. Really simple, I think. And then now finally down here we can use our crate manager, which we haven't passed in. And now we're going to do crate manager dot add crate location, crate name, and then location. And then we'll just send the player a message telling them that we added a new location for the crate, just so we can confirm to the player that it worked. Alright, so hopefully that all makes sense. This is simply a way to track, we actually didn't even use this. This is just simply a way to track adding a new location to a crate. We're just storing the players that we're tracking to this hash map here, and then we're referring to that. And then we're also adding a listener here so we can track when they interact with a block, because we want them to right click a block. If they do, we will remove them from the hash map and then add the location to the crate and all that good stuff. So now we need to actually call this method here to start the selection process. We'll go back to our create locations menu. So we'll need an instance of our create location selector that we just created. So I'll add it up above, private final create location selector. And then this time, instead of passing it through the constructor, because we're already passing so much and we have to route it through a bunch of different menus now at this point, we can actually get it through the plugin instance. So we'll go back to our main plugin instance, and then we're going to add it here. So private create location selector, and then we'll initialize it down here. This dot location. So then we'll just make a getter for this so that we can grab it through the plugin instance. So constructor, so getter location selector. We can now do Java plugin dot get plugin and then creates dot class. This is just yet another way to get an instance of that main plugin class, and then we can do get location selector like that. So now we could do this dot location selector is equal to this. I would recommend doing it more consistently than what I'm doing here, because I'm doing multiple things. I'm passing in the create manager, but I'm not passing in the location selector. So I just recommend being a little bit more consistent than what I'm doing. But now you can do location selector dot start selection, pass in the player that we're trying to do it for, and then the crate name for the crate that they're trying to select a location for. And then we could do player dot close inventory, and we'll also just send the player message telling them what to do, which is right click a block to set it as a create location. So this will start the process of waiting for them to do that. So that should be pretty much it for this new menu here. And so here we're going to set it up so that if they click the map, which is going to be the locations button, it will transfer the crate name to the player menu utility, and then open that create locations menu for the player to add a new location or view locations. All right, so we need to finish this menu here, the crates menu. So this is the root menu of all the menus. First, let's make it so that when they click the chest, they will take them to the list crates menu that we already created. So we will do menu manager dot open menu, and that would be the crates list menu. And then the player involved would just be a player that we're inheriting. We're going to worry about create later. And then also we'll need a way to actually open this menu. So we're going to modify a create command here. So we'll make it so that if they do not type the command with the arguments that we specified here, it will just open up that, root create menu for us. So say if args.length is equal to 0, meaning there's no arguments, then we will go forward with that. So we'll do menu manager.open menu, and we'll say creates menu dot class, and then the player involved, which would be our player. There we go. And then we're going to return true. So this will attempt to open the menu for the player, and then if something goes wrong, we'll just print the stack trace and then tell the player that an error occurred while opening the menu, okay? So hopefully that all makes sense. We added a lot, so what I want to do is test it out now to make sure it actually works. We should be able to open our crate menu, navigate to a specific crate, check the crate locations, add a new one, remove one, stuff like that. One last thing we need to do is to make sure to register our crate location selector because it does implement listener. So for this to work, we need to make sure this is actually registered as a bucket listener. So we'll go back to crates and do get server.get plugin manager.register events. And then instead of creating a new instance right here for this listener that's asking for, we can actually just use the one that we already created. This is the same class. So we were creating it before just because we needed to pass it in someplace else. But now that we need to register as a listener, we'll use that same instance that we're using here as part of this. And then now it's just asking for the plugin instance, so we'll do this. So let's go ahead and test it out now. All right, I'm back on the server now, so do /crates. And here we go, we get our crate admin menu, just good. We have crate, nothing happens because we have not configured that. But then we also have list crates. If we click it, nothing happens. That's not good. The issue is that in our crates menu, which was successfully opened, we have it so that when you click the chest, it should take you to the crates list menu, which if we look at, this has a constructor that takes in the PMU, which is normal because that's inherited as the constructor for paginated menu. But we also modified it so that it takes in a crate manager. So when you call open menu like this and you pass it in like this, it does not know to pass in that create manager, right? Now there's a couple of different ways that you could fix this. One way that we can fix this is just get rid of this. And instead of doing it like that, we can do it like this, like we did in the other class by doing java plugin.get plugin, pass in the create class. And this will give you an instance of the plugin class, which we can then do get, and then we don't have a method for it, but we can add a method for the create manager. So let's go back to crates. So we just need to add getter for it. So code, generate, getter, create manager. There we go. So that will now allow us to do create manager like that. I'll do the same thing for the create locations menu. So I'll just totally remove this, and then we'll rely on that Java plugin reference that we're importing. So let's do private final crates. And then now I'll just get rid of all of this actually. And I'll just rely on plugin. So now down here we could do plugin.get create manager.get location selector. Okay, let's throw it back on the server and see if it works. Okay, I'm back on the server now. So I'm going to go ahead and do /crates, list crates. This works now great. So we can see a list of all the crates, and this is also what a paginated menu looks like. So as you can see, it's basically a window here with all the things that you want to list inside your paginated menu. And then you could click next page, last page, previous page, first page. But obviously we only have one item, so there's no pages to go to. So now we can click to manage this crate, and now we have the manageability menu here. So we can manage the locations, the rewards, and also get the key. So locations, boom. And there's no locations currently, so we're going to add a new one. Boom, nothing happens. And now the reason for that is because the add location button is an emerald block, but down here we're specifying it to an emerald. So we'll just change that to emerald block. Okay, let's try it. So boom, boom, boom. All right, so right click a block to set as a create location. Right click, added new location for create Billy. Awesome, so let's go back now. And look at that, we have our new location that we just specified, so we can click to teleport to it. That works perfectly. And then we can right click to remove it. Let's first verify that it's actually in the config file. So we'll go to plugins and then crates and then crates.yml. And look at that. So we have our location here. Perfect. And let's try removing it now by right clicking. Location removed. Okay. And look at that. It's gone. The next logical step for this plugin will be to specify how to set up the rewards for the crate. So for this, we're not going to go super complex because obviously this video I don't want to make too long. What we will do is make it so that if you go to a crate menu So this one here, if you click rewards, this will take you to basically a window where you can drop the items into, and those items that you put into that little window will be the rewards for the crate. So that way you can configure the reward items in game, which is pretty cool in my opinion. The only thing that you need to change in the config file would be the weights of the items that you specify. And the weights will naturally decide how likely different items are likely to be chosen as rewards, okay? So we already have this crate class here, which has the name of the crate and also a set of locations for the crate. We're going to do this pretty much the exact same thing with the rewards. So we'll have private, final, and then a set of rewards. And we're going to just need to add a reward entity for us to work with. So we'll just call this about create reward rewards. Okay, and then here we can initialize that. So let's make that new class. So new Java class create reward. We just need to decide what a create reward will have. So like I told you before, we're going to keep it as simple as possible. It's only going to be items. We're not going to do anything special like commands or XP or money or anything like that. So we'll do simply private final material. So that'll be the material of the item as well as the amount we want to track. So amount. And then the other final thing that we want to track is the weight. Like I said before, the weight is basically how likely this item is to be chosen when we're cycling through and opening a crate, okay? So that will define the attributes of a crate reward. Let's make a constructor for that so we can create new crate rewards. Let's just make some getters for this. So code generate getter, boom. So now back in crate, we can see that this is resolved. And so now that we have a way of storing it in memory, we'll need a way to store it persistently. So we'll go back to our crate manager. And so here, where we load and save our crate information, let's also start saving the rewards. We'll do it almost the exact same way. So we're going to grab the section that we're trying to set it to. So we'll call it the rewards section, rewards like that. Next, we're going to loop through all the rewards that we have. So for var reward out of all the crate rewards. So crate dot get rewards. We don't even have a method for that. So let's go back, add a new constructor. So code generate getter rewards. And then this piece of code here will do the same thing as we do above. We're going to make a new section that represents the entire reward that stores the material, the amount, and the weight. And the J variables here is just a placeholder for the name of the section for the reward. So it's just an index indicator. So as we set the section name to J, we're going to increment it at the same time so that the next one will be the next available number. So that will simply save the reward. And then up here, we can now define how we're going to load those values. So we'll just copy a lot of this, change it to rewards section, and then if it exists, we will continue. So we're going to get the rewards section keys. Let's start by getting the material name. So locate rewards section dot get string, and then we'll say material. We'll also get the int amount is equal to rewards section dot get double, or actually integer get int, and then finally we'll get the weight. So double weight is equal to reward section dot get double. Okay, and then we can get rid of all this. And then from all those values, we can then now do material is equal to material from bucket, of course, dot value of, passing that material name. So we're trying to get an actual material object from the string name. And then now we'll do reward or var reward is equal to new crate reward. And we'll pass in the material, the amount, and the weight. Ideally, you want to do some validation with this to make sure that they pass in a valid weight. If it's not valid, then you could like log a message or a warning or something like that. But now that we have this reward, we can add it to our crate that we're loading here. I'll just add a method for that like we did with location. So now we can go back and call that. So that'd be crate.add reward. So finally, now we have a way of actually storing rewards persistently and then loading them. And so now we'll need to actually develop the system to actually specify those rewards via a menu. So we're going to make a new create rewards menu. So this menu is going to be a lot more complex than our other ones just because of the complexity of what we have to do. We have to essentially, the way I see it is make a little window using glass that the player can then put items into and then just handle all that logic essentially. So I'll just walk you through it. The name of the menu is just going to be rewards for, and then the crate name. We're just getting the crate name from the PMU like before and also getting the plugin instance. And then the slots is going to be the largest amount. We're not going to cancel all clicks this time because we want them to be able to drag and drop stuff into this menu. So that's why it's a little more complex. We got to handle which clicks should be allowed and which should not be allowed. So let's start by just adding the window. I'm going to copy and paste this code because it's just a lot of stuff you don't need to see me type out explicitly. So this will be our filler glass. And then now we're going to fill the first and last rows of the menu and then fill in the first and last columns. So you just have literally just a little square of glass that will be the borders for the window essentially. Now we want to load the existing rewards for the crate because there already might be some to display, and then add them to the menu, okay? Let's first get the crate, so var crate is equal to this.plugin.get crate manager.get crate by name, and then we'll do crate name like that. If crate is not equal to null, let's change it from a set to a list because with a list, everything has to be unique. It makes sense for locations because every location should be unique for the crates, but for the rewards, we may want to allow multiple rewards with the same configuration. But also a list will maintain the order in which you insert the elements, which we want as well. Okay, so we'll do new array list like that. So this piece of code here will allow us to loop through those items. So it's simply going to be a for loop based upon how many rewards we have. And then for each reward, we're going to get that reward based on the index. And then now we want to basically figure out or calculate what index we're going to place this item. So this method here will give us the proper slot in the actual inventory. So this will be the reward index. I know it's a little weird to look at, but basically it calculates the row that you're in or should be in and also the column. And then from that, it calculates the index. Now we'll make an item to actually represent this. So we'll do var reward item is equal to new item stack, and the material is just going to be the reward material that we're already storing. So reward.get material, and then the amount will be amount. There we go. So now we can add it using inventory.set item get inventory slot, and then and then the actual reward item that we're going to add to that slot. So just as a recap, we're looping through all the crate rewards. For each of these, we're going to have an individual index, so we know which item is which. We know that there's 28 slots max, so we're going to convert the index of the reward to an actual inventory slot so that we know where to put it into the inventory because it's only a little window where we can put it. We don't know the exact slot number, so that will just calculate it. We'll make an item to represent it, and then we'll set it using that inventory slot. The last thing that we want is a save button. We'll have this at the bottom, so it's an emerald block. You click it, it saves the rewards to your crate persistently. Now we need to actually handle the inventory clicking. So this means that we need to first make it so that when they try moving items that they're not supposed to move, we cancel the event so they can't drag like the border glass, for example. And also we want to make it so that if they click the save button, it actually saves it, okay? First things first, let's get the player involved. And then what we'll do first is check to see if the clicked inventory is the player inventory. So when you open up an inventory, obviously you have the top inventory, but then you have the bottom inventory, which is the player's inventory. If they clicked anything in the player's inventory, this is going to be allowed because we want them to be able to drag items from that inventory to this, rewards inventory. So we're going to make sure to not cancel the event. Of course, you don't need to specify it. You can just leave it without. But yeah, that's just step one in making sure that players can move items properly. So the next thing that we want to do is determine if they clicked in the top inventory, what they clicked on. Is it a reward slot or is it a non-reward slot? And now this piece of code will return true if they clicked the reward window, so anything in the middle, and then anything outside of that in the actual glass part or the emerald block will be false. So now we can go back up top and say if is reward slot. We can get the slot by doing e.get slot. If they did not click a reward block, meaning the middle window, we want to cancel it so that they cannot move any items. We don't want them to be able to move the glass or the emerald block to save the inventory. Now we can verify if they clicked on the save button or not by doing if e.get slot is equal to, and we'll do the emerald block slot. So that would be 49, I believe. 49. If they click that slot, then we want to go ahead and save the inventory. And now if it makes it all the way down here, this means that they did click on a reward slot. So they're trying to possibly drag an item into that slot or move an item or remove an item. So we're not going to do anything. We're just going to leave it how it is. We're not going to cancel anything because we want them to be able to move items, okay? So we can actually just remove this as well. So for saving the inventory, we're just going to make a separate method for that to keep it a little bit more separate. So we'll do private void save inventory. We're going to start with a list of rewards so that we know what to pass and save for the crate in a second. So create rewards is equal to new array list. So now we want to basically loop through the entire reward window and just get all of the non-null items, so the actual slots that have items within it, and then save that as a reward for the crate, okay? So we know that there's going to be 28 slots total in that little window. So we'll start with a loop here that loops through that 28. So I is equal to 0, I is less than 28, and then I plus plus. So for each of the iterations, we'll get the actual inventory slot. We already have a method for that, luckily. And then from that, we can get the item in that slot. So item stack item is equal to inventory.get item slot. And we'll say if that item is equal to null, then we'll just continue. If it's not equal to null, this means that it's an actual physical item that we can save. So we're going to do rewards.add new create reward. We want the material, so item.get type, and then item.get amount, and then finally the weight. which we'll just set to 10 by default. So now after this, you should just have a list of all the rewards or the items for the rewards that we want to have. So now we can save that into the crate. So do crate is equal to crate plugin.get crate manager.get crate by name. So we'll start by clearing the current rewards. So get rewards.clear just to make sure that we're replacing everything that's already there. And then we'll just loop through what we have. So we'll do rewards dot for each, and then for each reward that we have, we will go ahead and do crate dot add reward, create reward like that, and we can simplify this. And then finally, since we've made a modification, we can then do plugin dot get crate manager dot save crates, which will save it persistently. And then we'll just send a message telling them that the rewards were saved. So now we have our save inventory method, so we can go back up to handle, and we'll call that save inventory. And we'll close the inventory as well. So I know that was a lot. I know we did a lot in this specific menu here, but just like always, I'll have the code in the description below so you can check it out and stare at it longer. But I hope generally speaking it makes sense. Basically, we just have a very large menu, and in that menu is going to be a window where we can put items. So now we'll go back to our create menu and add it here since we need to make the button actually clickable now. So type is equal to material.chest, because that's what we specified down here as the rewards button. So if they click on the chest, we'll do the same thing that we did here. Specify the crate name, and then we'll do this rewards menu. And then one thing is that I noticed that the crate name is not consistent, so let's just change it to match what we're setting it as right here, okay? Whew. So again, I know that was a lot, but let's go ahead and jump on the server now and test it out to see if it works. All right, back in the server now, let's go ahead and start by creating a new crate. So create Billy. We created Billy, so now we can go into our crates menu, open this up, add a new location. Let's say this block here is going to be our crate. Boom. And we'll open this menu up again. We'll go to our crate. And then now we can click rewards. Here's our rewards menu. So this is what I mean by a little window. So we have our border, and then we have a save button here. And then anything inside of here will be the rewards of the crate. So as you can see, we cannot move the items that represent the border. If we click save, it will say save successfully. But now if we try moving items in the bottom, like I said, it will let us. And if we try putting those items on the top, it will let us as well, because these are reward slots. So now, if we save it, if we come back, hopefully it should be the same. And look at that. So all I did was rearrange it, which is fine. But importantly, we still have each of the individual items. I did not combine them into one stack because you may want to have different sets of items for your rewards. You may want to give the player a chance of getting 10 arrows or maybe just one arrow, right? Let's take a look at our config file and look at that. So now we have a reward section, and you can see all the rewards. So it has each arrow specified with the amount and the weight. Let's now talk about how the weights actually work. Not gonna lie, I used ChatGPT to generate basically how this works and understand how to use weights to generate a random selection of items. It's actually pretty cool the way it works. So we have this little text file to explain it. So it's called weighted random selection, right? So if we have some rewards and they have weights like diamond sword, weight 10, netherite ingot, weight 5, and dragon egg, weight 1, the higher the weight, the more common the item will be, the more likely you are to get that item when you do the random selection. The way it works is you get the total weight, so just add up all the weights of all the items that you're selecting from, and then what you want to do is generate a random number between 0 and the total weight that you just calculated. Then what you're going to do is loop through every single item and check to see if the current weight, which is the first item, is greater than or equal to the random number that you generated. If it's not, then you will go to the next iteration of the loop, which is just the next reward. You'll add that weight to the first weight, so now you have a new total weight, and then you'll repeat the process, check to see if the current weight is greater than or equal to the random number that you generated, and just keep repeating that process until you are over one of the weight values. That's probably still a little confusing, so let me give you another example here. If we have a diamond sword and it has a weight of 10, that would be a 62.5% chance. If we have another right ingot, it's a 31% chance. And then if it's a dragon egg, we have a 6.25 chance. The reason the ones with the higher weights are more likely is because, again, the weight that you have here has to be over the random number that you generated. So obviously 1 will likely not be over that random number if the number can be 0 through 16. Hopefully that's not too confusing. So to implement this now, we're just going to make a method here that returns randomly one of the items that we have for the rewards. If it's empty, then we're just going to return null because there's no items to obviously return. Now the first step will be to get the total weight because we want to generate a random between 0 and the total weight, right? So we'll do double total weight is equal to rewards stream map to double, and so we'll do reward and then reward dot get weight, and then finally we could do sum. So all this is doing is looping through each of the rewards that we have, mapping them to doubles by just using get weight. So it's going to convert it from a create reward type to a double type, which is the weight of the reward. And then finally, we'll just add them all together. So now this variable here holds the total sum of all the weights combined. So now we could do double random is equal to math.random, and then we could do times total weight. So this will contain that random value that we can use for this random selection. So now we'll need a current weight. So we're going to increment the current weight with the weight of the current reward. So get reward.weight. And now we'll do what I said before. We're going to check to see if that current weight value is greater than or equal to the random value that I just told you about. That would be current weight. So if it is, then we can just return that reward. If it's not though, if this weight for the first reward is not greater than the random value that we generated or equal to, what we'll do is go to the next reward, add that to the current weight, and then check to see if that new current weight is greater than or equal to the random number that we generated. So that is the process of doing the random selection based on the weights. And that's why a higher weight is more likely to be chosen, because it's more likely to be above that random number that you generate, okay? Now, if it makes it past this point without a reward being chosen, if it doesn't return out of this method here, technically it's possible that a reward may not be chosen, so you can just simply do return rewards.getLast. So it's possible that the last rewards may be skipped over just because of how we're calculating the random number and all this stuff here. So if that happens for some reason, you can just return the last one by default. Now in our create menu, we already have these 3 buttons here. One of them is for get key. This is the last one that we need to implement. So let's make a system for actually obtaining a key for a crate. If you want to, you can make a separate key manager, but I'm just going to do it in the create manager. So I'm going to go here, and first things first, we're going to need a namespace key. So private name. So this will be just the key. I'm not going to call it that. I'm going to call it I'll just call it key. That's fine. Or how about create key? Oh, it looks like I literally called that already. So I'll comment this one out real quick. Comment this out. I'll just rename create key to create name. Create name like that. So I should rename all the references automatically. Sure, make it final. And then now I could uncomment this one, and now this refers properly to the create key, not the create name. All right, so now what I'll do is make it so that you can just simply obtain a key item from this class here. So we'll do public item stack get key, and you want to specify the crates that you're trying to get the key of, so create name. And here's the code. It's really simple. We're just going to create a new item stack. That's a tripwire hook. That's just a common item that people use to represent keys in Minecraft. We're going to access the item meta. We're going to set the name to just green with the crate name, and it says key, so you know what it's for. And then this part's important. We're going to access the persistent data container, set the crate key, namespace key, set the data type to string, and then provide the crate name. It's important that we do this because we need to know for a key which crate it goes to, right? Obviously, we'll have no way to determine what crate that key is for if we don't store it onto the key somehow, or store it externally in some sort of database or persistent storage. So this is just one way you could do that. You could store it directly on the key, okay? We're also going to need this. This is a method that returns a boolean if a key is for a specific crate. So it just takes in the item, the key item, also the crate name, and now just match it to that crate to see if it can open that crate or not. So now that we have created a way to obtain a key, we can go back to our create menu, and we'll handle when they click on that. So if they click on the tripwire hook now, we can actually give them the key. So we'll do plugin.getCrateManager.getKey, pass in that crate name that we already have. And now we can do player.getInventory.addItem, pass in that key. And importantly, make sure you check the return type of this method here. It returns a hash map with integer and item stack. So the reason for this is because the returned hash map contains what it couldn't store, where the key is the index of the parameter and the value is the item stack at that index on the var_args parameter. So all this means is that if it cannot put this item into the inventory, the hash map will contain the item that it couldn't fit. So all we got to do is say var, we'll say leftovers is equal to that, and we'll say if leftovers. If the leftovers hash map is not empty, or say empty, then negate it. If it's not empty, then that means that the key item cannot fit into their inventory. So we'll just drop it at the player's feet. That's a very common thing that people do. So player.getWorld.drop item, and then player.getLocation, and then key. And then finally, we'll just send the player message telling them that we've given them the key for this crate. So now that we can get a key, let's make it so that you can actually use the key. So we're going to make a new listener called the key listener. Alright, so we're going to be listening to the player interact event, similar to what we did with the selection listener, except that this one, of course, will be just for whenever you right-click a crate with a key. So first, let's make sure that they actually right-clicked a block. So if event.getAction is not equal to action.rightClick block, and we're going to return because we don't care about anything else. Now we're going to get the block that was actually clicked. So block is equal to event.getClickedBlock. We'll also get the player involved. So player is equal to event.getPlayer. And let's also get the item that they used. Okay. So item is equal to event.getItem. So we'll need to determine two things. First of all, if this item here is a key, and also if this block here is a crate. We'll do the crate first. So we have a block here, right? And from this block, we can get the block's location. We know that every crate is going to have a list of locations. So let's make a method within Crate Manager to match this location here to one of the crate locations if it can. So in Crate Manager, we'll do public crate, and we'll say get crate at location. So this will return the crate if it can find it. If it cannot, it will return null. So we'll simply loop through every single crate that we have. So crates.values, and we'll say if crate.getLocations. We're going to stream through all those locations, and we're going to check to see if any of those locations match the one that we're providing to the method here. So loc equals location, like that. So that will return true if it matches, and then if it matches, we're going to do return crate. Otherwise, we're going to go to the next iteration. And now if it makes it past the entire for loop, it found no crate that matched the location, so we're going to return null. So hopefully that makes sense. It's simply looping through all the crates, checking to see if any of the crate locations match the one that we provide, and then returns it if it does, okay? So now back in our listener here, we can now do var crate is equal to plugin dot get crate manager dot get crate at location, and we'll do block dot get location. If crate is equal to null, then we're just going to return. Now we're going to check to see if the item is a key or not. So if item is equal to null, then we can return. Now we'll do if plugin.getCrateManager is key for crate, method that we created before. So we're going to pass in the item, and then we're going to pass in the crate name, so crate.getName. If this is true, then it's a crate key. If it's not, we're going to return because we don't care about anything else. So now at this point, we know that the block is a crate. We know the item here is a key. So if that's true, we can go ahead and cancel the event. We're going to cancel it to make sure that no unintended effects happen from this interaction here. So if the player right clicks a crate that happens to be a chest, it won't open the chest, right? Now we want to figure out what reward we want to give to the player. So we already made a method for that. So we can do var reward is equal to crate.getRandomReward. So it's going to choose one of the rewards using the algorithm that we talked about. And so we'll say if reward is equal to null, this means that obviously they have not configured any rewards for this crate. So we'll just tell the player, we'll just tell them that this crate has no rewards. First things first, we want to remove the key from the player's inventory because they just used it on a crate potentially. Now the crate could be in a stack. So first we want to do if item.getAmount. If the amount of the keys for that item is greater than 1, then we don't want to delete the entire item stack. We just want to take 1 away from it. So we'll do item.setAmount, item.getAmount minus 1. So that if they have 2 keys, for example, they're left with 1, not 0. So otherwise, if that's not the case, we can just do player.getInventory.setItem in main hand. We'll set it to null. That will remove the entire item stack from their main hand. Now at this point, we can open up the crate opening menu. We need to create that. So new Java class crate opening menu. This will be the menu that basically cycles through all the rewards like a slot machine and then lands on the item that we pre-selected for the user. So inside of here, we just pre-selected it. And now we're going to pass that to this new crate opening menu so that we know what item to essentially land on and display to the user before giving it to them, okay? So here's the menu. I just specified that we're going to extract the crate name from the PMU. We're also going to want to extract the final reward as we pass it from the key listener. So when you use the key, it's going to open up the menu, pass in the crate name, also pass in the reward that we're going to give to the player. And then in the menu, it's just going to extract that and then save it to these variables here so we can use it. The name of the menu is just going to be in purple, opening, and then crate name. So it's just saying it's opening it. For slots, we're going to do 3 rows, so 27 slots. We're going to cancel all clicks. We don't want them to be moving the items, obviously. Now let's fill in the items of the inventory. So what this will do is fill all the items except for the very middle slot using black stained glass panes. You'll see what that looks like in a second. That last remaining empty slot in the middle will just be displaying all the items that's we're cycling through it. So basically we're going to cycle through all the crate rewards and then land on the final reward, which is the one that we passed in from the listener, okay? Let's start by getting the full list of rewards for the crate. So crate is equal to plugin.getCrateManager.getCrate by name, crate name. Then we'll get the rewards. So var rewards is equal to crate.getRewards. Now to do the cycling, we'll need a way to rapidly repeat things over and over, which we can use a task for. So we're going to make a new bucket runnable. Now inside of here, you can define and override the run method, which will be the code that runs every time that this task, iterates essentially. Now the rest of this code I'm just going to paste. It's pretty much all just AI generated because it's a little complex. First, we'll add 2 fields here, current tick and then random. We're using current tick because we want a way to keep track of where we are in the animation, and also lets us control the speed, which is cool too. So it's going to start pretty fast and then slow down just like you would expect. So just like basically a slot machine, it's going to start spinning really, really fast through all the items, and then it's going to start slowing down and then finally land on one item, okay? And then this part will actually update it, so every time it selects a new item to randomly show, it's just going to grab a random one from our rewards list. So grab a random one, set it as the item in the middle slot, and then it's also going to play a little tick sound. So it's going to go tick, 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 and then, tick, 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 and then show the final item, okay? So finally, once it reaches the end, it's going to get the final reward that we passed into the menu, show it as the middle item, play a different sound so you know it's finished, a cooler sound. Then finally, we're going to spawn a new task, which is delayed by 30 ticks, which will close the player's inventory, give them the reward, and then send them a message telling them what they got. And then down here, we scheduled this task to run every single tick, so it's a period of 1, so every single tick is just going to repeat over and over and over. Give reward is a new method I created that is going to give a reward to a player, so pass in the player, get the item stack for the reward, so the material and the amount, and then it's just going to do what we did before. It's going to try giving it to the player's inventory. If it can't fit, it'll just drop it at their feet. Alright, let's open that menu for the player now. So we're going to get the player, menu, utility, and we're going to get that from menu manager.get player utility, pass in the player that we're trying to get it for. So this should just be player. We need to wrap all this in a exception handling. And if for some reason we can't open the menu to give it to the player, we already took the key and everything like that. So let's just give the player the item right away. So do reward.give reward to the player, and we'll just tell them the same message that we did in this opening menu here. We'll copy it and we'll send it like that. And we'll just change it to reward and reward. Now we need to set the data, so we'll do player menu utility.set data. We'll say create name, create.get name, and then player.menu utility set data. We'll do create reward reward. So now back in our create opening menu, we're going to grab it right here. So that's how that matches up. And then now we can actually do the opening. So menu manager, open menu, open create opening menu.class, and then player. So hopefully that all works. The last thing that we need to do before we can test this out is just to make sure that we register this listener that we just added, okay? There we go, it's added. So let's throw it on the server and see if it works. All right, I'm on the server now, so let's go ahead and make a new crate first of all. This dirt block here will be our crate. So do crates, crate, dirt, dirty. Okay, that works too. And now we'll open up our crates menu, select that dirty crate, add a new location. That's our new location, done. So now we can go back. We can specify some rewards for this menu as well. So we'll do some 6 rotten flesh, 1 piece of dirt, we'll do a chest, and we'll do a lead. Save that. So now we need to obtain a key. So crates, less crates, dirty, get a key. Look at that, now we have a key, sweet. So now we can right click our crate. Look at that, it's cycling through all the items, and boom, it landed on the lead, and we got the lead. Let's just get a couple of the keys so we can keep doing it. So look at that. Let me turn my sound on in a second too, but there we go. We got a lead again. All right, here's it with the sound turned on. Now let's go ahead and change our weights to see how the weights can affect how we get our rewards. Because right now, if we take a look at the file here, we can see that all the weights are equal essentially. Let's change rotten flesh to 90 so that there's pretty much a chance that we'll get rotten flesh almost every time. So now let's go back to our thing. We'll just reload. Okay, let's try it again. Rotten flesh. Dirt. Rotten flesh. Alright, so one of the last things that I want to show you is how to finish this create button here. So basically the idea is when you click on this create button here, it will prompt you for the name of the crate that you want to create. If you type cancel, it will cancel it, but if you type in an actual name, it will make a crate out of that. And then also give you a message that says click here, and it will take you to the crates locations page, or menu rather, so that you can add a location right away. So that's the basic idea behind this. Let's try it out. Let's make sure that the player's inventory is closed before we prompt them, but once they clear the emerald, we're going to prompt them, and luckily this is actually really easy because I added a new class to the Simp API that can do this for you. So all we got to do is import chat input into request input, pass in the plugin instance, which would be plugin, and then the player that we're trying to prompt, which is player. Now we'll need an actual prompt, which will just be this in yellow, enter a name for the new crate or cancel to cancel. So that will do that. And then after that, it wants you can either do just a consumer, which is just handling the input, or you can do a validator, a consumer, and on cancel as well. So if you do this more complex one, the validator is just to make sure that they pass in valid input. So for example, we want to validate that the crate already doesn't exist. So we'll take in what they pass in, check to see if that's already a crate. If it is already a crate, we'll return false and reject that. If it does work though, we're going to process it as input. And then if they cancel, it'll run this part here. So cancel. So I'm just going to paste the code so it's easier because we're running out of time as well. So, all right, this one is the validator, right? So we're going to pass in the input. This is just what they type into the chat. And then we'll check to see if it's already a crate. If it is already a crate, we're going to tell them, a crate with that name already exists, and then return false, which tells it that it's invalid. Otherwise, return true because it's valid. Now for this is if it's valid. So we're going to take the input, create a crate out of it, just confirm that it was successful. And then what we're going to do here is send them a message using text components. So you can tell them, click here, and then we're going to make the here part clickable. And when they click it, it'll run a command that takes them directly to that locations menu as I just described. So that will do all of that. And we're going to have to make that command in just a second here. And then here, this is just if we have to cancel, it'll say create, creation, canceled. So that will handle that logic as well, okay? Now, hopefully that all makes sense. Before we even work on this command here, let's just make sure the prompt actually works. So let's hop on the server and test it out. We're going to click create crate, and boom, it says enter a name for the new crate or cancel to cancel. So if we type cancel, create, creation, cancel, there we go. And then if we go ahead and run it again, now if we try it again, we can type Johnson. Now it says successfully created crate Johnson. Click here to manage crate locations. Of course, we haven't created that command yet. If it isn't clear already, the reason we want to make a command is because we want to take them to this locations menu directly, right? So luckily we can make it so when you click a message, it runs a command, and we can just have the code of the command open a menu using menu manager, pass all the crate information in like the crate name, and then, display the locations. So that's kind of why we need that. So we're going to make a new command in our commands package called the crates locations command. So this command is relatively simple. We're going to check to see if it's a player, make sure they have permission, make sure the command is ran the correct way. So create locations, crate, and the name. After that, we can grab the crate name and then validate it to make sure it's a actual crate that exists because obviously we don't want to open a menu for a crate that doesn't exist. And now finally, if it made it past all those conditions, we can use the PMU to pass in the crate name and then open the crate locations menu. So here it is, and then it takes the crate name, loads it, and loads all the locations, same as before, okay? So let's go ahead and add this. Let's go ahead and register our command and try it out. Okay, let's test it out now. So we'll do create locations, and then Johnson was the crate I just created. There we go. So click to add a new location. Let's add this block here. Added a new location for crate Johnson, so now it takes us directly to it. Sweet. So that's working, but obviously we don't want to use it like that. That's not the point of the command. We want it to be whenever you create a new crate. So we'll do create crate into the name. So we'll say Johnson again. Remember, we had that validator, so that's why it asked us again. So if it's invalid because it doesn't pass that validator, it'll just re-prompt you essentially, okay? We'll do cool crate. Click here to manage crate locations. Boom. So now we can directly just click into the menu, add a new location. Really, really simple. Hopefully all that makes sense. The chat prompt thing is really, really cool. So if you want to use it yourself for your plugins, then make sure to check out Simp API and get the newest version of it. What I'll do is take this message that we're sending that says click here to manage the locations and add it to our crate command as well, so that you can also do it whenever you use the command itself. So it's right here, I'll do it. Alright, so there's one last feature I want to show you guys, which I think is pretty cool, which is create holograms. Because currently whenever we have crates, specified, this could be a crate, that could be a crate, that could be a crate, anything could be a crate, but we don't know if they're crates until you walk up to it with a key and right click it. Obviously that's not ideal, so a hologram above a crate can help distinguish it from other blocks. So there's different ways you could do this. You could just use bucket/spigot for spawning a armor stand and make it invisible and add a custom name for the hologram. Or you could also use packets. That's another option. I'm assuming you already know what packets are, so I'm not going to re-explain all of that. But basically we can send custom packets to different Minecraft clients or players on the server to make them see stuff that's not actually there. So what we can do is basically artificially spawn, armor stands or holograms and then show them to the player whenever they're near a crate. So the idea is whenever a player is within 10 blocks of any crate, we're going to spawn a fake hologram, using packets, so the player sees a hologram above that block. The reason packets is a good solution for this is because we can conditionally show it to certain players, in this case players who are nearby the block, the crate block. Since we're not spawning actual entities using bucket, we don't have to worry about all players seeing it within any range. We just don't have to manage entities in general, which is a plus, because that can lag the server a little bit and also just make it a little more complex. Now packets are of course complex in general, but in this case I think they offer a good benefit. So to do this, we're going to be using a library called packet events. I have a very detailed video on how to use packet events. Make sure to go check it out. But basically the game plan is we're going to add a player movement listener using bucket and listen whenever the player moves, and whenever we detect that they're near a crate, we'll use packet events to send hologram packets, or rather entity spawn packets that are holograms to the player whenever they're within 10 blocks of range. Okay, so that's the game plan. Let's get started. Let's make a new manager called the hologram manager. So this will have two responsibilities. Obviously it's going to manage holograms, but it's also going to be a bucket listener to listen to that movement event I just told you about. We'll start by getting where the player is and where they move to. 2 can technically be null. I don't really know how, but it can. So we'll say if 2 is not equal to null. And then we want to make sure that they actually moved 1 block, because technically they can move within the block that they're already in, or even just move their head around. It should trigger this. So we want to make sure that they actually moved a single block at least to not, overload how this is going to work. This condition here will do that. So we're going to make sure that they moved to a block that's not the same block that they're on. So when you do get block X, this will give you a whole number that represents your X coordinate and then Y coordinate and Z coordinate. So all this is doing is validating that you move at least one X, one Y, or one Z coordinate to trigger this condition here. If this is the case, then we're going to loop through all of our crates on our server and see if you're within range of any of them. If you are, then we'll show the hologram. If you're not, we will hide the hologram if you can see it. So do for and then var crate manager.get crates list. And then remember, a single crate has multiple locations, so we want to check each of them. So we'll do crate.get locations. Now let's just loop through all of those. So for var location, crate.get locations. And I also make a method that can tell you if the player is within that location or not, within 10 blocks of that location, okay? This here will do that, so is in range. It's going to take a player location and a location, or a crate location, and then it will check to see if the player's in the same world as that crate location. If it is, it'll also just do a calculation to see if it's within 10 blocks. So this will be determined by the hologram range, which is just a constant that we're defining above, but obviously you can make this an actual config value that represents the number of blocks that counts as range for a hologram. I'll just leave it at 10 though. I think that's a reasonable number. So now down here we can do if is in range and then event.get player and then location. So if this is true, then we want to show hologram, and then if this is false, we want to hide if shown already. And we want to get their location, of course, not just the player. We'll need to track which players we're showing holograms to, and also the location of each of those holograms. For that, we'll use our handy dandy hash map. So this will be for every player. We like to use UUIDs though. So UUID to identify a player, and then a specific create hologram. We're going to make a class to enclose a bunch of information about the hologram, like the location, just the mechanism for spawning it and despawning it, stuff like that, okay? And then we'll do player holograms as the name. So now down here, we can then initialize it. This.player holograms is equal to new hash map. Let's make our new class now. We'll make it in models. So new Java class create hologram. All right, so what is every hologram going to have? It's going to have a location. We're also going to need to track the crate name so we know what the hologram is going to say. We'll say something like, crate name and then click here to open crate or something like that. I think that's good for now. And then we'll just make a constructor for that code, generate constructor, location, and crate name. The location, we're going to clone it, and then we'll add on to it by doing 0.5, 0.5, and 0.5. You'll see why this is useful in a second. Basically, this will center it and then move it up a little bit so it's more visible. It'll make more sense when we actually test it out. But cloning is just to make sure that we don't modify the original location, because that can create issues. So that will literally just make a copy of the XYZ values and put into a new location object for you. Now I'll just make a method that can show the hologram. So public void show, and then who we're showing it to, we'll show it to a specific player. Like I said before, we're going to be using packet events. So I need to import packet events using Maven, and then also set up a few things. Here's the packet events GitHub. So if you scroll down, you can see the documentation right here, getting started. And then this will basically show you how to install it. I like to use Maven, so I'll use this. So I'm going to copy the repositories, and I'll go back to my project, go to my pom.xml, and then here I will put these, and then I'll go back, copy this, and then paste the dependency, and make sure that you replace platform with whatever platform you're using. In my case, I'm using Spigot. Okay, and then make sure you click the Maven reload button. Okay, so now we'll go back to our main plugin class, and we need to configure a few things. So the first thing is just loading it. So we're going to override a new method here, code generate, or code override methods, and then it's going to be on load. So on load, we're going to do all of this. This is available in their documentation. So we're just going to set the API and tell it what we're using, Spigot packet events, build it. We can turn off check for updates and also B stats. We don't care about B stats, and then load it. And then now for on enable, we can do packet events.getAPI.init. And then for on disable, we can do packet events.getAPI.disable or terminate. That's all you need to do on the code side. One last thing that you need to do is install this packet events plugin to your server. This will just make it so that your plugin can actually interact with the server using packets. So download this and put it into your plugins folder and restart. So to send a packet to a player in packet events, we'll need to obtain a user. We can get a user by doing packet events.getAPI.getPlayerManager.getUser. We're just going to pass in player from bucket. It'll just know how to translate that into a user for us to use. So make sure it's not null. If user is equal to null, then return. If it's not, now we can actually work on sending the packet. So we'll need to spawn for a hologram a spawn entity packet, and then we'll need to configure that entity afterwards with another packet to make it look like a hologram. So behind the scenes, a hologram is just going to be an armor stand with a custom name, essentially, okay? So we will send the spawn entity packet and just set it to armor stand, okay? So we'll do that by doing wrapper, play, because it's a play packet, server, we're sending it from the server, and we're spawning an entity, spawn packet is equal to new wrapper play server spawn entity. And now we can provide a bunch of information here. So first of all, we'll need a unique entity ID. So this is something that is required of every entity on the server. We just need a unique ID to work with. This will allow us to refer to the entity later on when we send further packets, like configuring it or despawning it. So we'll store it up here. So private int entity ID. So this entity ID is equal to Spigot reflection util .generate entity ID. That's provided by packet events to easily generate an ID. But basically, this will just guarantee you that you get a unique number for this entity that you're trying to spawn for the player. So now down here, we can do this .entity ID. The next thing it wants is a UUID, which is another identifier for the entity, but we don't really care about this one. So we'll just randomly generate it like that and then not worry about it. And now we need an entity type. So to do that, we can do entity types dot, and we have all these options here, but we want armor stand. Make sure it's entity types, not type, from packet events. And then after that, we need a location. But be warned, this is not a bucket location. This is a packet events location. So we will convert it by doing spigot conversion util dot from bucket. And then we're going to use the location above. So this dot location. So that will take that bucket location, convert it to a packet events location, and return it. And now we want the head yaw, which we don't really care about. We're just spawning an armor stand. We don't care about the head yaw. We also want some extra data. We don't really care about that. And we don't want any velocity, so we'll set it to null. So that's the spawn entity packet. Now we can send it by doing user.send packet spawn packet. So we'll just make sure that this works before we configure it to make it look like a hologram. And so we'll also need the public void hide one as well. So hide for the player. We'll do the same thing as before. We're going to get the user. And then once we have the user, we can then send a wrapper play server destroy entities packet, which is obviously going to destroy an entity or remove it from the server. So destroy packet is equal to new wrapper play server destroy entities. And now all it's asking for is either an entity ID or a list of entity IDs to despawn those entities. And we're storing it, so we can just pass it in like that. So now we can do user.send packet destroy packet. So just as a little recap here, we're creating this create hologram class so that we can store information about a crate, like the location, the crate name, which will be just the text of the hologram, and then also an entity ID, which will be the unique ID for this entity that we're showing to the player. And then we're going to show it to the player by getting the user for packet events, creating a spawn packet, configuring other information like the entity type, and then we're going to send it to the user. And then we're hiding it using the same sort of idea. We're going to send a destroy packet instead, okay? Now we can go back to our hologram manager and import that. And now down here, all right, so these two methods here will do that. We had to make one change though. Before we had it so every entry is a UUID of the player and then a create hologram. But of course, a player could be seeing multiple holograms. So we need to allow multiple entries per player. There's multiple ways we could do that. One way is just to have another hash map within it that stores every single create hologram along with their location as the key. So now down here in our show hologram to player method, we pass in the player, pass in the create location, and pass in the create. First, we'll make sure that the player has an entry if they don't already. So we'll add a new hash map, an empty hash map. After that, we'll just grab the player's entry. So we have a map of all the locations and the crates tied to those locations for the holograms that the player should see. Then, since we're trying to show a new location or a crate location as a hologram to a player, we'll make sure that they're not already seeing it by checking to see if this map here contains it already. If it does not contain it, then we'll continue with showing it. So we'll instantiate a new crate hologram, pass in the location of the crate and the crate name. We'll make sure to add it to the player's map so we track it, and then we'll show it to the player using our show function, which sends the packet. The hide one is very similar. We're going to get a map of all the crate holograms that we're showing to the player and their locations. If it's not null, we're going to attempt to remove the location from the map. If that works, meaning that it's already in the map, it will return it after it removes it. So you'll have it in this variable here. So that will mean that this is not null. And if it's not null, this means we remove the hologram. So we're going to call hide to remove it from the player's view. So that will despawn it. I really hope that makes sense. If it's confusing, make sure to just go check the code in the description below. But now here we can call show hologram to player, pass in the player that we're trying to show it to. Then we want the location of the crate, so location, and then the actual crate for that location. And then we'll do hide hologram from player, event.getPlayer, and then location. So just to recap again, this manager here will manage all of the holograms that we're showing to each player as long as they're within 10 blocks of range. So to actually determine that, we're going to have a player move event that determines when a player actually moves from block to block. And every single time we're going to loop through all of our crates, check to see if they're within 10 blocks of a single crate location. If they are, we'll show it to the player using a hologram if it's not shown already. And then if they're not in range, we'll make sure to hide it if it's not already hidden, okay? What I will do now is make sure to instantiate this in the main class and register it as a bucket listener. So I will see you on the server in a second to test this out. All right, I'm back in the server now. So I know that dirt block right there is a crate. So watch what happens when I walk up to it. Look at that, armor stand. If I back up, it's gone, it's back, it's gone, it's back. So clearly when I walk within 10 blocks of this crate here, it shows the hologram, so this fake entity that I'm spawning using packets. Really cool. So now all we have left to do is send the entity metadata packet to modify the attributes of this entity to first of all hide the armor stand, set a custom name, set the text of that name to the crate name and stuff like that. So let's get that done with. Here's the documentation for Minecraft packets. You used to be able to go to wiki.vg/something or other, and that would be the official documentation that people use for packets. But that website has gone down, so the new link that you can use is minecraft.wiki and has a copy of their website essentially, so you can refer to this now. But this is the packet. It explains what the packet is, what information you need to provide. So we have an entity ID, which we already track, but then we also need to provide some metadata, so you can click on this for more information. So this is a very detailed list of information here that I've gone over in a previous episode, but basically here's all the data types that it supports for metadata, and then under that you have every single entity type on the server that we can configure metadata for. So this is the base class for entity, and then for every entity you have these options here that you can configure, such as the pose, has gravity or not, custom name, is on fire, stuff like that, is invisible. But then you have specific entities like, or painting for example, where you can specify a painting type. So you can see a living entity has even more properties than just a base entity. That makes sense. So we'll go back to our create hologram, and right before we send our spawn packet, we'll add a new packet, wrapper play server entity metadata, which is that metadata packet I just showed you. Metadata packet is equal to new wrapper play server entity metadata. So we need that entity ID, so we know which one it refers to. And now packet events wants a list of entity data objects. So luckily, since we're using packet events, they make it a lot easier than otherwise. So we can just use their entity directly. So we'll do a list of entity data from packet events. Now the first thing that I want to do is make it so that the armor stand is invisible. So going back to this documentation here, we can see that the very first option for entity data is a byte. And these are the different bytes that you can supply to this as values. And every single byte here corresponds to different options like is swimming, is invisible, is on fire. So we want to basically set entity data for index 0, make sure it's a byte, and then provide the 0x20 bit mask to make it invisible, okay? So we'll do data.add new entity data from packet events. And now we can provide the index, which we know to be 0. Now we want the entity data type, so entity data types plural dot, and we know it's a byte, so we'll do byte. And then now we want that bit mask, so we'll make sure it's a byte, and then we'll do 0x20 like that. So that's all you got to do. Now for the hologram, we want to do a custom name. So first we'll do is custom name visible. That's index 3. We set it to true or false. It's false by default, obviously. So we'll set it to true. And then we can provide the custom name with index 2. And this is asking for an optional text component data type. So we'll do data.add new entity data. So 3 is the Boolean, so entity data types Boolean. We'll set it to true. So this will allow the custom name, and now we can add the custom name text by doing new entity data. Entity data 2 is the index, and then the data type for this one is entity data types dot. You have advanced component and optional advanced component. To know which one's which, go back to the documentation, and you can see that it's asking for an optional text component, so make sure it's the optional one. So this will just be a regular Adventure Library text component, so it's going to be in gold, and it's just going to have the crate name as the actual text. So we can provide it as hologram text, but since it's a optional advanced component, this will not work, so we want to wrap it with optional.of, and then that will fix it and make sure it works. Let's actually add on to this and make it so that the hologram text also says after that right click, so that you can right click the crate to open it, right? Now there's one more option we can specify if you want to. We're going to go to armor stand specifically. So here's all the options specifically for armor stands. You can see that index 15 asks for a byte, and then you have these different options here like is small to make it a small armor stand. Does it have arms? Does it have a base plate? Stuff like that. So if you want to make it small, we can do that by targeting 15. So we'll copy this one here. So now once you have the list of all the entity data changes that you want to do, you can just provide the list to the packet and then send the packet after you send the spawn packet. That makes sense, of course, because you want to spawn it and then configure it, because you can't configure something that doesn't exist. So we can do metadata packet like that. All right, so now that we made those changes, let's jump on the server and make sure it works. All right, I'm back in the server. So if I walk up to it now, look at that. It now looks like a hologram. So it says the crate name, Johnson, and right click. Nothing happens, of course, because we don't have a key in our hand, but we can obtain a key. I don't have anything that says rewards, so yeah, it looks pretty good to me, right? So it only appears if we're within 10 blocks, so it despawns, good. Then it respawns. Despawns, respawns. I think it's a really cool effect overall. Hopefully you guys find this interesting. I'm sure you could apply the same idea to different types of plugins, like conditionally showing packets to players and all that fun stuff. It's always useful. But yeah, that's pretty much it. That's the last major feature I wanted to show you guys. I know this was a very long video, but I really hope you guys found this video helpful and interesting and insightful to create, more complex plugins. If you want to see anything else, then please let me know in the comment section below. Just some unique ideas that you guys might have. Of course, there are a couple of things that I left out of this video, like listeners to make sure you can't break crates or put blocks next to crates, or just, general stuff like that. I will have those kind of things in the source code. I just don't want to show everything just because the video is so long already, and I think you understand the gist of it anyway. So just make sure to check the source code and you'll have a more complete version of this. And yeah, thanks for watching, everybody. You just learned how to make a crate plugin from scratch. Peace! So that's it for this video, everybody. I really hope you learned something new. If you liked the video, please hit the like button, and if you want to see more, hit that subscribe button. Make sure to also check the description below for important links to code and other resources, but also really important, join our Discord. We have a big community of over 5,000 programmers, and it's a place where you can find new friends or get help on any code that you're stuck on. If you want to support what I do on this channel, please consider hitting the join button below, and this will allow you to support my channel for as low as $1 a month, but there are different tiers to choose from if you want to. For anyone that becomes a member on my channel, you get a special rank on my Discord server, early access to new videos, and you can just see yourself on the screen right now. So if that sounds cool to you, feel free to join. If you don't want to, that's fine. If you can't, that's okay too. I really just appreciate you watching the video anyway. Thank you so much. And that's it. Peace.